Hey, welcome. Betty Smith with Sauter County Daily News. We are the People's News. We're #1 for a reason, and that reason is you. I have the pleasure to be here with Phil Jones and Stan Richards tonight, and I'm going to start out with Phil, if you want to introduce yourself to folks.
Hello, my name's Philip Adam Jones. I'm with the Sons of the American Legion down at James Dickey, American Legion Post 23 on Court Street, and just here want to have a little talk, a little discussion about an event that's coming up, Remembrance Day for December 7th, Pearl Harbor. And want to introduce you all to Stanley Richards. Let Stanley talk for a while.
I'm glad to be here, glad to be a part of this. I'm retired out of the Army with 23 years, retired as a Command Sergeant Major. I'm a member of American Legion Post 23, and I'm here to do this remembrance with you guys, and I've done a little bit of research on it for you.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So just a little bit of background on those that don't remember or don't know what December 7th, 1941 is and how important it is. The attack of December 7th, 1941 was a personal for Americans, and it was personal for the American Legion. December 7th, 1941 will forever be emblazoned in history, as President Roosevelt said, a date that will live in infamy. For America, the attack was personal because the day weathered in our nation's entry into the war that would claim more than 407,000 American lives. It's personal for the American Legion as well, because in the preamble of the American Legion, into the Constitution of the American Legion, it directs us to preserve the memories and the incidents of our association in all wars. This includes remembering the 2,403 Americans killed during the attack, the thousands more wounded, and the countless that witnessed who will forever be changed. We must remember Pearl Harbor, not just on the opening salvo along with the war, but we also must remember it as it was. An ordinary Sunday morning in which unsuspecting Americans, service members displayed extraordinary heroism. 84 years later, we still remember them because forgetting them would be an additional act of infamy. So God bless us on this Remembrance Day for Pearl Harbor, and God bless America. I'm going to turn it over to Stanley Richards.
There's a clear timeline of events that happened in Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. That's what the date was in Hawaii, but the date in Japan was December the 8th due to the date line. The attack unfolded in two main waves and lasted approximately an hour and 50 minutes. At 3:42 Hawaiian time, a minesweeper Condor spotted a periscope near the harbor entrance, and it was a Japanese midget submarine. The Japanese carrier force had 6 aircraft carriers led by Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagano. I can't pronounce that right. The first wave was 183 aircraft from position 230 miles north of the island of Oahu. At 7:37, Destroyer Ward attacks and sinks the Japanese submarine outside the harbor, the first American shots of the Pacific War. At 7:02, radar stations at Omaha detected incoming aircraft 132 miles out, but was told by the supervisors it was probably friendly B-17 bombers arriving from California. The radar contact is the Japanese first wave. At 7:40, first wave of Japanese aircraft began approaching the islands from multiple directions. At 7:49, the leader of the pack was heard on radio saying "Tora, Tora, Tora," confirming complete surprise. At 7:55, the attack officially begins. Japanese torpedo planes, dive bombers, and fighters strike. Battlefield Row, the Arizona, the Omaha, West Virginia, California, and others. The airfield at Wheeler, Hickman, and Ford Island, and 2 other locations. The Arizona exploded after a 16-inch shell hit the forward magazine, killing 1,177 soldiers, Navy personnel, crewmen, the largest loss of life of the whole raid one time. At 8:10, the U.S. Omaha capsized after multiple torpedo hits. At 8:17, Admiral Keamy, commander of the Pacific Fleet, received a message: "Air raid, Pearl Harbor. This is not a drill." Between 8:40 and 8:50, most battleships on Battleship Row were heavily damaged or sinking. Airfield largely destroyed and the aircraft destroyed on the ground. The second wave started at 8:54 and went till 9:45. At 8:54, the second wave was 171 aircraft. Arrived it was slightly less than the original one due to the loss of aircraft. Focuses more on airfield and secondary targets, plus additional strikes on ships that escaped the first wave. They encountered heavy artillery fire and anti-aircraft fire due to the forces being alerted, after the surprise. Nobly, the USS Nevada attempted to get underway, but deliberately beached to avoid blocking the harbor channel. At 9:45, the last Japanese aircraft departed. At 10 o'clock, Japanese planes were recovering to their carrier. The task force returned northwest and withdrew. The Japanese decided not to launch the third wave that was planned, which was probably their mistake. Some of the aftermath: on December 7th afternoon, the fires continued to rage, especially on the Arizona and the West Virginia. Rescue operations began. Sailors and civilians pulled survivors from the waters and the burning ships. 5 Japanese 2-man midget submarines were lost and one captured. That was the first Japanese POWs of the war. The final tally of the attack, U.S. losses was 2,403 killed, 1,177 alone on the Arizona, 1,178 wounded, 18 ships sunk or heavily damaged, including 8 battleships and 188 aircraft destroyed. The Japanese losses were far less. They had 29 aircraft and 5 submarines, 130 personnel, 55 airmen and 70 on the submarines, and 1 crew member captured. The attack was a complete surprise and crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet battleship force. Though the 3 aircraft carriers were out at sea and were unharmed, and a mission that would prove devastating later in the war. At 1 p.m. Hawaiian time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, President Roosevelt addressed the nation and delivered the speech that was a date which would live in infamy, and the United States formally entered World War II the next day. One of the other things I'd like to talk about: why did the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, the reason was Japan attacked Pearl Harbor was that the political leaders believed the war with the United States was inevitable and that a surprise attack offered the only realistic chance of winning quickly. Here are the main reasons in order of strategic importance. Would you believe that oil and resource embargo was the immediate trigger? By mid-1941, the U.S., Britain, and Netherlands had cut off virtually all oil exports to Japan. Japan imported 80 to 90% of its oil, almost all of the U.S. and Dutch Indies. Japan had only about 18 to 24 months of oil reserve that left wartime consumption rates. Without oil, the Navy would stop sailing and the Air Force would stop flying. Within a year or two, Japan leaders saw this as a de facto economic warfare and believed the U.S. would never lift the embargo unless Japan withdrew from China and Southeast Asia, something they were unwilling to do. To secure oil, rubber, tin, and rice permanently, Japan planned to seize the resource-rich colonies of the Dutch East Indies, British, Malaya, and the Philippines. However, the large U.S. Pacific Fleet based in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, was perfectly positioned to cut Japan's sea lines and wreck the southern invasion. Japan's planners concluded that they had to cripple the Pacific Fleet at the onset so they could complete a conquest of Southeast Asia.